Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today we have something extra special to share with you. Back in October, we hosted an event called Stitchfest. Nearly 100 people gathered at Seamwork HQ, and we shared an afternoon together recording a live podcast episode. We hosted a patternmakers panel, we had a sample sale, we had social hour, and we had crafts, and it was a total blast to meet so many of you. This week, we're going to be sharing the Pattermaker panel discussion where we gathered 6 local Portland pattern makers to discuss their craft. I think you're going to love hearing from these incredibly talented and experienced pattern makers with all different specialties. All right, so we'll start with Robin. Robin Ives is our lead pattern maker here at Seamwork. She studied design in New York City, but was drawn to the precision and logic of pattern making. That's Robin in a nutshell. With more than 30 years' experience, she's worked for Patagonia, UGG, Doen, and Hannah Anderson. And a fun fact about Robin, she's an avid knitter, and she often dyes her own yarn.
And I've never felt taller than right now.
Don't get used to it. You're sitting next to Erin, though. She's. Erin Erlings is one of our pattern makers at Seamwork as well. She studied apparel design at OSU and spent several years working for various women's wear brands in New York City before moving back to the Pacific Northwest to work at children's wear brand Hannah Anderson and at Nike. Fun fact, while at Nike, she patterned intricate silhouettes for NFL teams. Very different from what you're doing at Seamwork. Peggy Mead is the founder of Sew House 7, which is an indie pattern company here in Portland. She studied apparel design and got an internship at Patagonia right out of school. With over 30 years of pattern making experience, she's worked at Nike, Janssen, Tommy Hilfiger, and Pendleton. Fun fact, she designed a swimwear pattern for Princess Diana. Ooh. Becky is the founder of Workhorse.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't design it. I made fit adjustments so that it fit her. No, I didn't get to do it on her. They sent her measurements.
We appreciate your humility. Becky is the founder of Workhorse Patterns, and she also brings you all the Portland Frocktails events. She's on a mission to make our sewing community a brighter place, not only with her designs and pattern making, but also her talent for hosting totally fabulous sewing parties that are open to all. So fun fact, she's got some fun in-person events planned for 2024, so go follow Portland Frocktails if you don't already. Ellie Lum is the founder of Clum House, a bag-making shop and school here in Portland. She founded a messenger bag company and studied adult education before founding Clum House in 2015. She strongly believes you don't need a fancy sewing machine to make professional, heavy-duty bags at home. All you need is some courage and a dash of creative grit. So fun fact, Ellie used to be a bike messenger before she founded her first bag company. And Sharon Blair is a fashion entrepreneur, designer, and writer. Sharon Blair founded and directs Portland Fashion Institute, a licensed and accredited career school that enables students to become industry proficient in apparel design, construction, and business. Sharon's apparel life began in 1990 with a custom clothing business, and she has advanced degrees in apparel design. Fun fact, Sharon even studied couture sewing in Paris. So that is our fabulous panel. I'm going to start with some icebreakers. So we're going to have an icebreaker for each of you. So Sharon, let's start with you. You have more than 50 years experience in fashion. What's your favorite thing about working with people who are interested in a career in the fashion industry?
I got to say that we think that we've had 8,000 people come through our door over the 12 years we've been in business. I like to think that people are the fuel, we're just the fire. It's already in them, what they want to be. We just are the spark to help them get there. And isn't it great to be thinking about a third of your life is going to be spent doing something? Why not make it fun? Why not make it creative? Why not make it something that's close to your heart? And when we see somebody who's finally found that thing, the light that comes on their eyes, it's so rewarding to see that. That's the best part.
That's amazing. I feel the same way. I think with work or with hobbies, you know, what you do for your living or what you do just because you're passionate about it. I feel the same way. Peggy, the next one's for you. You have 32 years in the industry at a bunch of different brands. What's been the best part of switching from ready-to-wear brands to home sewing for you?
There's a bunch of answers to that. The first one is, when I'd work for a company, you always have to keep in mind like the cost of the garment, and you can't do this, you can't do that because it's too expensive. And when you're doing home sewing, you can the sky's the limit. You can make I can make patterns for difficult things with lots of embellishment or simple things, whatever I choose. I don't have to worry about the end cost, of a garment that's going to be sold. So that's fun. But the other thing I really love is that I actually, correspond with the customers, which in the apparel industry, you rarely do that. You're always trying to figure out who your customer is. I mean, we always would have, what are they called? Focus groups. Yes, focus groups. And, we didn't get it right, or, you're just guessing, stabbing in the dark. Who's our customer now? Or we've lost our customer. And I actually, on Instagram or through emails, talk to customers, and I see what they're wearing and what they want. And then, I don't have to be so specific. They can take a pattern and make it their own, So one pattern could appeal to totally different customers. They could just use it as their base. And so I love seeing that too, seeing the creative stuff that comes out of what people do. Anyway, sorry, I'm nervous.
Aw. That was an awesome answer. You don't sound nervous at all. Becky, you're the pattern maker for your company, Workhorse Patterns, but you also run Portland Frocktails. So what's your favorite thing about working with the sewing community in both of those capacities?
By nature, I am a puzzle solver. I have to solve for X. And all your life, you solve for X. Everything's math all the time, right? You're always, from the day you learn to walk, you're solving for X. And so I love to reverse engineer things and take things apart. And that includes figuring out what makes you figure out to be social. Sewing by nature is a reclusive hobby, or even if it's your profession. If I'm grading a pattern, I'm not going to talk to you while I'm grading a pattern. Can you imagine how that would come out? It wouldn't be pretty. And I can't talk to you while I'm sewing. We have sewing groups, but really you're going to sew over your finger if you don't, pay attention to what you're doing. So the idea that every time I throw a social party, I'm trying to figure out what are the social prompts. Like we do a maker swap in February, and we, do a charity. We have you bring things for Rosehaven, but really, the whole thing is just a social prompt. I put up clothes that you made, you come and take somebody else's clothes and swap with yours, but you talk to the person next to you. The whole thing is a big old rouge. I fooled all of you that came. You thought you were coming to a maker swap? No, you were coming to speed dating. But for friends. So it's a total high for me. Like I'm super addicted to seeing later on Instagram or somebody telling me, yeah, we're on the Pedalpalooza bike ride for so many bikes with somebody I met during the maker swap. Like that to me, that's better than sex, baby. And so it's the same with the pattern. Like if you, my friend Mary, wherever she is, she's like, I figured out the burrito method because of your instructions. Do you know what that feels like? Like, I got to figure out something else that I can make you learn. So that to me is all completely selfish. It has nothing to do with you. I say it's community, but it's really about me, because when I see that you get a thrill out of it, it gives me a thrill.
That's amazing. And it's something that's so needed in this day and age where I think a lot of people feel that sense of loneliness and isolation.
My husband just came back from advertising week, and he was sending me photos. Advertising week is like fashion week, but for advertisers. And he's sending me pictures of this, and this is like a multi-million-dollar event with mucky mucks from whatever. And everyone's on their phone during the networking, right? And then they complain about not enough networking opportunities. So again, make the social prompts. It's funny that my little tiny event that makes me no money is more successful socially at networking than this multi-million-dollar event in New York that's a week long. So I feel like, yes, it's more difficult now that we're all separated by social media and we look at each other, all the good stuff, and then we compare, which is a thief of joy, when instead we can meet each other in person and I force you to socialize, which is why there are never enough tables to sit at, so that you have to walk around and talk to each other.
Little inside baseball there. All right, Erin, you also worked at several brands before coming to Seamwork. What's been your favorite thing about making the career switch from ready-to-wear to home sewing?
I think it's been super rewarding to see all of the creations that everyone's made and posted in the community. Like when you work in ready to wear, you don't necessarily get to see your stuff walking around in front of you and see it, in the wild. And it's so rewarding to see everyone's creative takes on, patterns that I've had my hands on. So, yeah.
And Robin, you have nearly 3 decades of pattern making experience, including almost 7 years here with us at Seamwork. What's been your favorite thing about making a career switch from ready-to-wear to home sewing patterns?
Making sewing patterns is so much more creative than ready to wear. It's really easy to get pigeonholed into a niche of whatever your department in whatever your company's niche is, So like for a few years at Patagonia, I made base layer. I cannot convey to you how boring making base layer is. Except the one-piece cat suit with bum flap I made. That one was pretty fun. So it's just like at Seamwork, I get to do everything. I get to do coats and dresses and gender-neutral things. And it's so much more fun knowing that every month I get to start something completely different. But even more than that, it's like there are so many more opportunities to learn more about pattern making. Years ago, I managed the team at Patagonia, and I was tasked with looking for classes or training they could take, and I couldn't find anything out there, anything that could teach us what we're learning by just doing it. And I don't think there's any company I've ever worked for that I learned more than I know at Seamwork, because I just get to do it every single day. It's a dream. It's a dream job. And then also like getting to see you guys and talk to you guys every day in the community and now meet in person. It's just, like Erin said, you don't get that in ready to wear, and you feel really isolated from what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, oh, there's an Ames blouse. There's an Emma top on Emma. It's so much fun.
Yeah. And Ellie, you've always had a teaching focus. You went from co-founding a custom messenger bag company to studying adult education, and you combined the two to found your bag making shop in school. So what's your favorite thing about teaching sewing to so many people?
Listening to all the answers here, I'm like, yes. It's the empowerment, right? It's that aha moment that you see people get. And I also think that it's about opening doors and more for our belief system and what we think we're capable of than actually the skills. Because, I can teach you how to sew a zipper in a bag, but to teach you to take that and know that you can take that technique and try a bunch of stuff and have the courage to actually mess up on it and be playful and sort of explore and know it's not going to be right, but that's okay, and it doesn't mean that you're not good. Like, I think it's that aspect too, and I end up teaching a lot of women, and so there's this cultural thing that we have to overcome too, in our confidence in what we can do. So I think every time you can have that aha moment and you can be like, yes, I did it. What else can you do?
All about building confidence. It's really interesting. I feel like a lot of the answers that we've heard today are really about how sewing is a vehicle for something that's much larger. So Peggy, you kind of touched on this. You have your hands in the entire process, from designing the pattern to marketing it to customer service, the whole 9 yards. So can you tell me briefly about the process of making a pattern for the home sewing market and what that's like for you?
I'm going to try to make it brief. I start out with the design, and I don't always stick to the design. Once I make it, I might, decide that I'm going to do something else to it, or this doesn't really look that good, or that might be difficult. Maybe I need to think it through more in the beginning, but I do kind of like to just tweak things as I go. Once it's ready, I grade it. Now I've been sending it out for grading. I used to do all the grading myself, but send it out for grading, and I'll grade it up to a size 24, even though the standard sizes don't go up there. I take that size 24 and I refit it on my size 24 mannequin, and then make those adjustments. I have to keep sewing up the garments, making tweaks, and then have that one graded up and down for the other size range. Then write instructions, put that pattern into Illustrator and make up all the, markings, change the line weights, all the stuff you see, when it's all polished. And then it goes through pattern testing. And I end up making quite a few changes usually after pattern testing, not major fitting things, just little things, but like people will catch errors. And I do have the instructions proofed, but the pattern testers catch so much. It's really great. And then have a photo shoot and edit the photos, put the photos online, make a newsletter, make an Instagram post, make an ad, make a blog post and a tutorial. There's a lot, and I get, that's on top of customer service and Instagram and stock management and shipping, and yeah, it's overwhelming sometimes. I do have a little help, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And that's why I only get 1 or 2 patterns out a year. Yeah, it takes a while.
And do you feel like there are advantages to kind of controlling that entire process? Because you mentioned before customer service and how you actually get to see the people and the patterns, So I was wondering if you feel like it's there's benefits to doing everything yourself.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, but yeah, there are. Yeah, I can quickly change things, and I'm talking with the customers. People will email me if they find an error or ask me why I did something the way I did it, and sometimes like, why did I do it that way? Maybe I should have done it a different way, or there's a good reason why I did, and I explain it to them, and then but when I hear enough back from people too, then it kind of informs how I design something similar to that again. Oh, well, people had trouble with this, or they really don't like linings, or they do like linings, or whatever it is, I'll keep that in my mind. And so it's really nice to have all that information dealing with the community. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anybody else have any thoughts about this?
We do that same thing. Yeah. But I got to tell you that the big 4, which is now basically the big 2, they don't have what you and I are talking about here, that interaction. I always say English is a funny method of communication because you're trying to explain things, but the English words just don't quite connect. But being able to have a conversation with whoever's using it helps improve you in how you're showing people how to do it. Plus the fact that you have that interaction, so people, you can't really learn from the YouTubes or from a book. It's that human interaction that really makes that connection. So what you're doing is just exactly right. Maybe only doing 2, but quality versus quantity, baby.
Yeah, Ellie, I was wondering actually how you feel about that. Do you feel like there's distinct advantages to teaching in person versus, Sharon mentioned like YouTube, books, or just, people teaching themselves through instructions?
Yes, for sewing, there is advantages to learning in person because it's so hard to explain and see, when I was teaching pre-COVID, I was teaching, 8 classes a month, but I wouldn't even have to see what everyone's doing. I could hear it on the machine, or I could hear, and I could be like, oh, over there, this and that, and it's like, I teach online now, which is just different, but I can reach people from all over the world, so I think there's pros and cons of each. And then of course there's retreats now where people can travel and they can learn from me when I go teach at, festivals and stuff. I think it kind of goes back to the sewing being like solitary versus community. And then it's so hard, right? It's not an easy skill. It's so vast. So the amount of concentration, you're so interacting with yourself, even when you're in a community environment, that as a teacher, the softer skills of can you do it, confidence, like making friends with your seam ripper, that's transcendent, in person or online.
Yeah.
Sharon,
how is designing for ready-to-wear different from home sewing patterns, since you have experience with both?
Well, I pray to God that people are learning from using independent patterns as opposed to the big four, because let's face it, they're mostly based on dress forms. You know, they got this consistent sizing, and I'm sorry, maybe I was a dress form size when I was a teenager, but I am not anymore. Gravity happens. So that's the difference between, you're asking about home sewing versus ready-to-wear. I think there are, I want to think back to, people are thinking they should be perfect right at the get-go. And several things that you learn from ready-to-wear is that they have their own standards based on who the consumer is. And you may not feel that you have that right off the bat. Well, then taking a couple of classes, like sewing and learning how to sew, how they do it in ready-to-wear, as opposed to maybe what you learned from your grandma, like don't use pins when you're sewing and that sort of thing. Different kind of seam allowances, so you're not having to waste time with trimming and grading and notching and clipping and all that kind of wasted time. But also how to then move on to pattern making so that you can invade the exterior of that pattern and make it your own, as we do when we're thinking about our consumer, our customer in that ready-to-wear category. I like to think a lot about how everybody is, well, we all know who Picasso is, right? Mr. Cubism. But you know, he started off with still lifes. Yeah, there you go. And then he went into the blue period and cubism. So that's you too. You're going to learn the rules of how things are made, and then you're going to break those rules. You're going to go into that interior of that pattern and make it your own, because you are your own customer for that ready-to-wear garment. That ready-to-wear is you, your personal, fits me, I love this thing, I'm going to wear it for a lifetime. That's the difference for me.
Yeah. Erin or Robin, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I'll answer the difference between working ready to wear to home sewing. I think for me, it's really awesome and like a huge learning opportunity to be working so closely with our sample sewer, Aretta, and our technical illustrator, Gina, because they give feedback that, you know, I could figure that out on my own too if I was sewing it up, but like their feedback is invaluable. And that's something that working in ready to wear, you don't necessarily have that direct contact with the person who's actually sewing the garment. You know, the factory is often wanting to use as least amount of fabric as possible and the cheapest construction technique. You know, they're all about profit and efficiency. And so working with home sewing, I feel like you get a much more quality product, and I just feel so much more connected to it as a pattern maker.
Ellie, back to you. So you're a champion of just how empowering the skill set is. So what drew you to bag making as a way to teach people how to sew?
Well, like I used to run a bag company. I was a bike messenger in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was a teenager, and in my early 20s in Philadelphia. And we made bags for all, like East Coast, right? So we would ride our bikes even in the snow and through all the weather and everything. So there really wasn't product that was built for those conditions. So we would have to repair, we weren't making a ton of money either. So we would have to repair our bags. And my mom taught me how to sew when I was 6, how to hand sew, and I grew up hand sewing. And so it was natural to be able to help my friends fix their bags. And through running that company, it was a custom bag company. So we made everything in-house. So I ran a small batch manufacturing studio in in Philly, and also in San Francisco, where I was from and I had moved back to after I lived in Philly, and also in Seattle. So I had a lot of years of manufacturing in-house and teaching people how to sew on industrial machines and trying to run a sustainable company through the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, when the artisanal revival movement wasn't fully going. And we were running into a lot of issues with how to source more sustainably and how, social responsibility. So anyways, bags was part of being in the messenger culture. And then I got just really into teaching because I was teaching all the stitchers that came to work for me because sewing manufacturing isn't a skill set that is common in the US. So I would hire stitchers like you that knew how to sew really well. And then I'd bring them into manufacturing and I would teach them how to make bags. And a lot of them started their own bag companies. So they would use a studio. We had a big warehouse space with a ton of industrial walking foot machines, mostly Conso 206 RB5s for any of you that are industrial stitchers. And I would let them use the machines after hours to sew bags for their companies. I was like, well, this is more fun than trying to, hit the mark with cost of production and all the other stuff. So then I went to school for adult learning theory and started Clumhouse. So the bags part was like, that's what I already knew how to do because I'd been doing it for 15 years. And then the teaching part came from that. But I used to make clothes when I was young. I would make my Barbie clothes and, all that stuff. But bags just became, I think, the more like industrial heavy duty stuff, like I really like using a hammer in the sewing shop, using an industrial machine, like using tools that you wouldn't normally find in the sewing studio is like cool to me. And I like showing people that. So I just like the more like rugged, rough aspects of bag making and how it crosses the line into like, woodworking or leatherworking. Like it really becomes this more like maker sphere. Yeah. And so that's just the route that ended up going, but like with sewing too, like there's so many avenues to specialize in. Like you could be like an advanced bag maker, but like a beginner garment stitcher. So you ask someone, like you ever try to like level your patterns and you're like, oh, this is a beginner pattern. It's like, well, it's a beginner pattern if you're this. Yeah, but it's an advanced pattern if you're this. And it's like kind of, you could go.
Try to go to garments.
Yeah, quilted garment. Yeah, tailor. It's kind of funny. Yeah, it's such a vast. Anyways, long answer, but.
What excited you about teaching? Because you mentioned you felt like that was more fun.
Yeah, it's more fun because for one, people could make a living off the skill that I taught. So bags are making and selling handmade bags. Like I don't know as much about the garment world for this, but in bag making, it's pretty common for bag makers to start their own businesses selling their bags. Yeah. Like, I don't know if that's as common in garment, but in bag making.
I think it's easier with accessories because they're seasonless.
Yeah, and so you don't have to grade them, that aspect of sewing. So the entrepreneurial connection and my experience with that, and it just really felt like that was the most robust place I could serve.
Mm-hmm. It empowers people in a different way if they can start their own bag company.
Yeah.
From what you teach them.
Yeah. And so now I'm teaching bag design. I actually have a free bag design challenge next week if anyone's interested in bag design online. But yeah, so looking at, I really like that holistic picture, Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, just empowering people and just people having a moment to, be like, I can do this.
We call it growing the fabric of goodwill.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like what you were saying, Becky. I mean, it's like we're building this whole creative universe here. And Portland's such a great place. We have so many creatives here, so many fabric stores. Thank you, Jesus. So I mean, it is, I just love listening to you, Ellie, because it's just, I think, touching on something that's akin to all of us here. Mm-hmm. That we just love doing these things ourselves, but we love bringing along friends, making new friends, building that spark. I knew you had it in you. Yeah, here you go. Yeah. I see so much hatred and anger out in the world, and I'm thinking they could take that energy and do something positive, like go to Clumhouse and make a bag.
Yeah. Well, it's funny is y'all were talking about ready to wear and the big difference, and it's like it's a whole different goal. Like there's like efficiency and like mass production, like the people that are buying ready to wear, they're not trying to interact with their creativity and build a skill. I mean, in the end product, you end up with a shorter pair of pants or a dress. Like the end product is there, you get to wear it. But the difference of how you get there, it's like a totally different goal. You know, to spend our time making stuff that we wear, there's so much there, you know,
Because you have more appreciation.
Exactly. Like the labor involved and whatever, you know. So yeah, time is the most precious resource. And to spend your time doing this, like obviously that's more important than if you're just going to go buy a thing. Not that, you know, everyone has the combination.
The retail therapy high is nothing compared to the I made this high.
I don't even shop anymore except fabrics. Switch to fabric shopping.
Hoarding.
So, Becky, the next question's for you. Sharon, you know, you were touching on Portland and the community that we have here. So, between your work with Frock Tales and running your own pattern company, you're at this really interesting intersection with the sewing community and the sewing industry. So, what aspect of the pattern making process do you wish that you could share with home sewists?
Are you talking about my soapbox? If you know me, you've heard this one. The thing that I wish I could share is that, and Sharon touched on this, and everyone here has touched on this. So have you ever gotten one of those books that has all the stock architecture patterns in them? And you're like, or you get on Pinterest and look at architecture patterns and be like, I like that house. I like that floor plan. Have you ever done that? Do you know what I'm talking about? And you can buy them, but then you have to fit it to the land that you bought. Say you got sloped land or a creek or an FBA. So I think a sewing pattern is the same thing. You know, yes, there's no such thing as everybody having the hourglass 10-0-10 ratio. You know, very few of us have it. Or very, you know, I have fairly easy pattern adjustments, like an FBA, and I'm tall. But for the most part, nobody's going to fit a pattern out of the box. But the fun part, you know, the nut you get to crack is finding those adjustments and fitting it to you. I always say I can't compete with Old Navy, nor would I want to. But you bet your ass I can compete with Nordstrom. And I can make myself look good for, you know, and compete with Nordstrom prices. And I'm not, you know, making some kid sew it for me in Bangladesh. So I really like that. But then the idea that you can fit it to your body, and think of it that way. When you're getting frustrated because you can't quite get that crotch curve right, remember you bought the Stark architecture pattern and you can learn how to do it. You know, ask somebody. I have answered questions about my patterns and gotten on FaceTime with people to help walk people through it. I will do that. Most of us will do that because that's how important it is for me to have you be happy with what you made. You know, I don't care that it was $12. That's not the point. The point is that you get it, that it clicks in there somewhere. And if it takes, you know, I know those 2-dimensional drawings because I make them, and in the instructions, they're not always perfect. And sometimes the video doesn't work for you. You don't need to exercise the same spatial reasoning skills that we've all had to exercise and learn. That's not your job. That's our job. And so let us help you fit that around your body. You're taking something 2-dimensional and fitting it 3-dimensional. And I would also like to add on to the Clum story of, you know, the industrial sewing machine and the hammer. You have to sew on one. Have you ever sewn on an industrial sewing machine? Oh my God. So yeah, come, let's go play. Yeah, come over to my house. Let's go over to PFI. I talked to Lord's Luggage yesterday, Andy. He's got a whole bunch in his shop and he does happy hours on the 15th of every month. And we're gonna go and he has all kinds of industrial machines. Or Rebecca Piercy, let's go play on her machines. It's like, it's so fun. It's like going 4x4ing for the first time. So it's really fun. It's totally exciting. You don't want to own one because they take up way too much space, but let's go play.
But definitely wear a seatbelt because they can be dangerous.
Yeah. Close.
Erin, is there anything that you wish you could share about the pattern making process?
The biggest one that comes to mind is that a simple silhouette isn't necessarily a simple fit process. So for example, like take the Mercer jumpsuit, which is coming out next month. It has a lot of bells and whistles on it, you know, a collar, pocket, waistband. You'd think that that is a much more complicated fitting process. But this actually took half the amount of prototypes than a simple shift dress that I was working on. And the reason for that
is of all the anchor points in this jumpsuit. You know, it's your shoulder and your waist, like there are connection points to your body versus, you know, more simple shift silhouette. You're working a lot with the balance of the garment and trying to get it to hit that happy middle ground. And fabric. Yeah, I mean, so many things come into play. So I think the reason I'm sharing this is, you know, if you're struggling with fitting something that you think that it should be a simple garment, it might not be that simple.
That's a really good point. Anybody else want to add anything?
Peggy said, and fabric. Like, just because you're fitting something and it's not fitting right, you have the difference between, we're wearing the exact same garment in entirely different fabrics. You know, she's got a voile, I've got a lawn. And they sew differently and they wear differently. And if I would have made this in a linen, it would be entirely different still, or a rayon. And so we'll have these patterns and you can sew them in all of these different fabrics, but they're not going to be the same garment. And so when she's saying she's making a shift, which is, you know, just your basic shell dress, it's all it is. It's actually much harder than it looks, you know, and it hits everybody's body different because it's not going to have your A-line skirt. It's more straight up and down with like fisheye darts, and it's kind of a pain in the butt, you know, where this, you know, you could just have like a loose open waist, you know, and the crotch curve is going to be baggy enough. It's not going to be so difficult to fit. That it looks like a pain in the butt, but it's actually the easier sew. I totally agree with you. It's kind of funny how some of these gathers hide a multitude of sins, right? So yeah, I totally agree. It's funny what appears to be difficult may not be.
I can add to that. When I worked at Janssen and we did swimsuits, and you'd think that the simplest swimsuit would be a tank suit that is just a carryover style in a new knit, new fabric. But knit fabrics, the stretch is so extremely different. Some stretch more in the width, some stretch more in the length. You could have the exact same fabric, but it's just on a different lot, and it'll stretch differently. So the pattern makers used to fight over who got the open back tanks, because you'd have people breathing down your neck. That's late, we need to get it out. And you'd be on your 15th fitting trying to get the straps to go back, and then you'd have to put a center back seam in it because now the straps were going to be past the fold line, and yet they seemed so simple, you know. It was just, yeah. So fabric can make all the difference.
I think that's probably encouraging for a lot of us. You know, when you're struggling with something that you think should be easy to do.
It's not you.
It's not you, yeah. So, Robin, we've talked a lot about fitting, and we get asked a lot of questions about fitting, and our whole team works to answer them for any seam worker who writes in. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about fit?
Gosh, I think they all just explained it. But yeah, it's kind of exactly what Erin was saying. You know, the garments are made to a specific set of measurements for the fit model, and you've got the width measurements, the ones you're all used to, the bust, the waist, the hip, but there's also armhole depth and across back and thigh width or thigh circumference and bicep. And so when someone is choosing a pattern, if they muslin it and they're like, okay, my bust matches and my waist matches exactly. Why am I swimming in this? It can often be because of those other measurements, you know, length measurements. My baby at Seamwork, the 4 zones of height. You know, you've got your shoulder to your under bust, and your bust to your waist, and your waist to your crotch, and then crotch to your leg. And so if you don't get those things in the right place, even if those circumference measurements are matching, it's not gonna sit right. I think we have like 32 different measurements we take on our new fit models, all our photo models, and we don't have to adjust for every one, but we do have to do a lot of comparisons and get those points right.
Yeah, I think those length measurements are something that are really often overlooked.
Yes, armhole depth is like, that's the big one. Mm-hmm. If that's not right, other things are going to feel off. It's going to feel too tight. The bicep, you're going to feel like your bust is too tight because your bicep is hitting because the armhole is too low, something like that.
Yeah.
And that often happens. So the myth of grading up to fit your bust causes the arm side to go down too low because you don't have boobs on your back. So why are you grading up? Do it a proper FBA, because if you grade up to fit your bust, you knock down your arm size too long. So then your fabric is pulling from the back to make up the circumference in your bust, because it's pulling that circumference from the back because it put it in evenly. So now you think you need to do a narrow shoulder adjustment. And then you think you need to do all of these other things when really you needed to do an FBA, a full bust adjustment, instead of grading up to fit your bust. That's like another pet peeve.
It goes both ways. Yeah. Please don't size down.
Yeah.
Unless it's like quince that, is like super open and wide. Sizing down can cause your armhole to be too short and your waist. There was a question a while ago. Someone sized down like 3 sizes and nothing fit. And I wanted, we wrote in, no, go back. Yeah.
Well, we're going to end with a question for everyone, so maybe we can just go around the circle and start with you, Robin. What do you think is the number one thing home sewists could do to think more like a pattern maker?
Math. Measure. Then remeasure. Then measure some more things. Really just like pretend you're making a 3D model of your body, and then measure everything again, and write all of those numbers down, and then check the ease chart and check the body chart, and note that difference and write that down. And then think about how much ease you like in a garment and feel good and comfortable in a garment, and write that down. And then divide all those numbers by the number of seams, and then change your pattern. And this is what I do for every photo sample.
I would say for me, just accept that you're going to make a muslin. Like, it just makes such a better quality garment if you just bite the bullet and take a little more time. Uh-oh, I see fingers being pointed.
That wasn't a popular answer, Erin.
Wrapping it up. I mean, maybe some of you can figure it out without a muslin, but for me, I feel like muslin...
She's walking it back.
I'm just going to shut up now.
Maybe we could just think about the first one as being your prototype. Maybe that's not the perfect one. You'll learn about that pattern.
Yeah,
with
wearable
the first
muslin.
one, and then the second one will be the better one.
Nice save.
What about you, Peggy?
Well, this was a hard question for me to think of the answer, and now I'm going to have the same answer. I never really made muslins when I was sewing all the time when I was younger. I hated it. If I did sew up something and I didn't look like it was going to look great on me, I just would not finish it and go on to something else. But now I love to make muslins, because I don't love to, but I find it important. Or a wearable muslin, like you said, because if you just make it in actual muslin, yeah, you can maybe see that it's going to get around your body, but it's just going to look different, and sometimes might discourage you from finishing the final garment. So if you make something that at least you don't like it, you can sell it or give it to Goodwill or something, so it's an actual garment. And I suggest making it in as close to the actual fabric as that you're actually going to use in your end product. Because in ready-to-wear, they are not just, pattern makers not just coming up with the pattern and it fits the first time. I mean, they go through, like I said, I'm not kidding, when I was doing those tank suits, sometimes 15 times, or something or more. And so they make lots of, it just depends on the style, but lots of toiles. And so that's just something that goes along with fitting a garment.
So first of all, for ready to wear, there's differences too. One day you'll get an Old Navy t-shirt, it'll fit, the next time it won't. They're allowed 3 inches of slop. Like, they're allowed a lot of variation when it comes back, and that's why it's $5. So don't, again, beat yourself up over not fitting that. The more you pay, the less slop is allowed in their cutting and coming back. So I'm going to make you my friend and disagree with them. If you know your body measurements, you can learn how to flat measure a pattern. And once you flat measure a pattern, you would know what it would be on you. The finished measurements will give you that, but also sometimes the visual, again, with the spatial reasoning skills, it helps to I used to always just flat measure a pattern. And then I would know what changes to make, because again, I already know height, so where am I putting in the height? My boobs aren't up here. Those patterns that have those multiple cups, my double D's up here, that's hilarious. So I prefer getting a B-cup pattern, just measuring down where things are and moving them around, because I know where their waist is, I know where my drop is between here, my bust. So you could do flat pattern, and then, yeah, you can muslin it and see then if you want to. The other thing you can do is pull out something that already fits you and put the crotch curve against that crotch curve and see how it measures up. If it's already not going up your butt on the pants you have, and this one clearly is going to go up your butt, don't scoop the crotch. That takes out circumference of fabric, another pet peeve. Just check your crotch curve against the ones that already fit you. Another cheat you can do is, it's not going to hurt my feelings if you don't try my patterns, but you already know, for example, Peggy's blocks fit you. Like, I know her stuff fits me, and all I have to do is add in height and pop in an FBA sometimes. I know I keep a Seamwork account because I know if my kid goes, I want this to wear, I could take any of their patterns, they're excellent bones, and I can strip it down. I've literally made huge cosplay outfits for my kids out of their patterns. Entirely out of just their patterns, because I can strip it all down to the bones, and I know it's going to fit because I know how it already measures out because I've already used it a million times. I know how they work, how their stuff comes out. So if you don't want to try somebody new, you want to stick to who you have, you're not going to hurt anybody's feelings. It's your body. It's to make you happy. You already know it fits, so you already know what measurements you need to pop in on those patterns. So those are kind of your cheats you can get around if you don't want to make muslins every time. That's my 2 cents.
So Becky, you're saying measure?
I know things about you, girl.
So in bag making, sort of the equivalent of what you all are talking about is actually gets into the realm of design, you know, because essentially to fit a bag, you have to try the straps on, you know, but the bag is supposed to fit your stuff, right? And it's also supposed to function in the activity that you want to use it in, or for the person with the activity that, you know, and what's the main thing you don't want a bag to do? Well, you don't want your stuff to fall out, and you don't want the straps to tear out. So you get into this like more construction and design realm with bag making because a lot what this is like is the iterations in the sample making process is just built in more to garment making. But with bags, people will make it, you know, the way the chef designed it, and then they'll make it again and say, okay, well, actually, I'm going to move this pocket, or I'm going to size this up. But you start to get into design changes, right? And so then you have to think more like a bag designer instead of pattern bag designer, if that makes sense.
Always add more pockets.
Always, yeah, but label them because then you can't find your stuff.
Oh, is it my turn? Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to say pattern making's the best. I'll just assume that. I know you all like to sew. You're here because you like to sew. But I'm just going to tell you right now, pattern making's the best. It's where the rubber hits the road. In fact, I'm sorry, if you cut me, I would bleed Optitex. You know, that was it. It's where the rubber hits the road. It's where your ideas come to life. It's there. You cut it out of the fabric. You cannot cut out of the fabric and make a garment until you have a pattern. When you're thinking about taking the measurements, altering the pattern, whatever it is to make it work for you, don't think of it as, oh my God, it's a place between me and my garment. Think of it as a voyage of adventure and discovery. It is. I mean, you're thinking about the things that you love to wear. Isn't it great to make the clothes that you made, to wear the clothes that you've made? So you know what looks good on you? You know what you like. Take a look at that. Pick out the patterns that are going to match that look on you, and then know the tools of pattern making. Know the rules, break a few, make that pattern work for you, and then just knock that off, baby, one after another. And then you'll be having a wardrobe, that basic classic wardrobe, that is your go-to garment, that you know it's going to work for you every time.
Thank you, everybody. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing all your insights with everybody today. Let's give them a round of applause. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.